There is a moment that happens in Yellowstone National Park, in the dead of winter, when the temperature has dropped below -20, and the snow is knee-deep across the valley floor and the bison have bunched together in the thermal areas near the hot springs, their breath rising in great clouds of steam that mix with the geothermal mist until the whole scene looks like something from a dream. And in that moment, if you are watching from the right ridge, from the right angle with the right stillness, you will see something come out of the tree line that changes every assumption you had about how nature is supposed to work. Not one wolf, not two, a pack. Moving in a line through the deep snow, close together, deliberate, absolutely without panic or hesitation, and they are small, genuinely small compared to what they are walking toward, which is a herd of bison that weighs individually somewhere between 500 and 900 kilograms each, animals whose horns can open a wolf from shoulder to hip with a single movement, animals that have been killing predators since before humans were a serious presence on this continent. And the wolves do not slow down. If you have ever seen that and tried to explain what you felt watching it, you already know why we are here today. Subscribe right now if you want to understand the natural world at the level where it actually operates, not the simplified version, not the nature documentary shorthand, but the real thing, the thing that takes years of field observation and behavioral ecology and hard winters in the snow to even begin to understand. Because what happens when wolves take on bison is one of the most complex and demanding and frankly astonishing things that occurs anywhere in the wild, and most people have no idea how it actually works. Let us start with the basic fact that most people carry around in their heads and which is wrong. Most people believe that wolves are generalist predators that will take whatever is available and that their relationship to prey is relatively straightforward, that they find an animal, they chase it, the weaker or slower one gets caught and they eat. This model is not entirely false, but it is so simplified that it misses almost everything important. The real picture is radically more complicated, more intelligent, more adaptive, and in some ways more disturbing than the simplified version. And nowhere is this clearer than in the relationship between wolves and bison, which is in some respects the most demanding predator-prey relationship that currently exists in North America, and which tells us things about wolf cognition, wolf social structure, and the way information travels through a pack that should fundamentally change the way we think about these animals. The reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone in 1995 gave ecologists something they had not had for 70 years in that ecosystem, which was the opportunity to watch wolves and bison interact in real time, continuously, across seasons and years and generations. The Yellowstone Wolf Project, which has been running continuously since before the reintroduction, has accumulated thousands of hours of observation data. Individual wolves have been tracked from birth to death. Pack dynamics have been documented in granular detail. Prey selection choices have been recorded and analyzed. And what has emerged from that data is a portrait of predatory intelligence that in some respects we are still working to fully interpret. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. To understand what happens when wolves take on bison, we first need to understand bison themselves, and specifically we need to understand why bison are not like any other prey that wolves routinely pursue. Because the difference is not just a matter of size, though size matters enormously. The difference is the whole package. A mature bull bison in the peak of his physical condition can weigh 900 kilograms. That is 900 kilograms of muscle and bone and horn organized by an animal that has been an apex prey species for millions of years and has evolved accordingly. Bison are not passive. They do not run from predators the way deer and elk run, in a straight burst of speed toward cover or safety. Bison run, yes, but they also turn and stand and fight in a way that reflects a different evolutionary strategy, one shaped by the fact that on the open grasslands where bison evolved, running did not always offer the same advantage it offered in forested terrain. Sometimes the best defense on an open plain was not speed but solidarity and the willingness to face the threat directly. Bison horns are not decoration. They are weapons, and they are short and curved and positioned for exactly the kind of close-quarters combat that wolves attempt to initiate. A wolf that comes in too close to a bison's head is in danger of being gored and thrown, and the throw alone, at the speed and force a large bison can generate, is enough to be fatal. The rear hooves are equally dangerous. Bison kick with a precision and power that can kill a wolf outright, and unlike many prey species, bison kick in all directions, not just directly behind them. A wolf coming in from the side, trying to get to the haunches or the hindquarters, is in range of a kick that can arrive from angles that an inexperienced or unlucky wolf might not anticipate. And then there is the herd dynamic, because bison do not just defend themselves individually, they defend each other. When a wolf pack approaches a bison herd, what the wolves are encountering is not a collection of individual targets but a collective defensive organism that has its own logic and its own strategies. The adult bulls will position themselves on the outside of the herd facing the threat. The cows and calves move toward the center. The herd as a whole may begin to move, But if the wolves press, the bulls will turn back toward them, creating a rotating defensive perimeter that keeps the most vulnerable members of the herd behind a wall of horn and muscle, and the specific kind of courage that comes from 10,000 generations of being the thing that predators test themselves against. This is what wolves are walking toward when they approach a bison herd, not a prey item, a tactical problem. A problem that requires information and coordination and patience and the ability to read in real time the behavior of an animal that is larger, stronger, and armed, and to find within that defensive system the specific point or moment of vulnerability that makes an attempt viable. And the wolves have solved this problem. Not perfectly, not every time, because failure is a fundamental part of predation at this level, but they have solved it in ways that tell us something remarkable about what a wolf pack actually is. A wolf pack is not just a family unit, though it is that. It is not just a social group, though it is that too. A wolf pack is, in the context of predation, an information-sharing system with a memory. And the memory part is the piece that most people have not spent enough time thinking about. Individual wolves learn. They learn from direct experience, from the outcomes of hunts they have participated in, from the injuries they have sustained or avoided, from the behavioral patterns of specific prey in specific places. But individual wolves also learn from other members of the pack, from watching and from following, and from the social transmission of behavioral strategies that happens within the pack unit. And crucially, the pack as a whole carries a collective memory that exceeds what any individual within it holds, because the pack is multi-generational and the older animals carry experiential knowledge that the younger ones have not yet acquired. What this means in practice, when we are talking about bison predation, is that a successful pack hunting bison in a particular area over multiple years develops what we might call an institutional knowledge of bison behavior and bison vulnerability. They know, not abstractly but in the lived, embodied way that comes from repeated experience, that a bison that is holding its head lower than the rest of the herd may be sick or injured. They know that a bison that is separated from the main group by 50 meters is in a fundamentally different defensive position than one within the herd. They know that bison calves in the first weeks of life, before their legs have fully developed their speed and stamina, represent a different category of opportunity than adult animals. They know that old bulls past their prime, bulls with the particular gait change that comes from arthritis or old injury, are different from young bulls. They know the topography of the territory, which draws or which ridge offers terrain advantage for a pursuit, where the snow is deepest and most exhausting for heavy-bodied bison, where the river narrows and forces a crossing that a fleeing animal must slow down for. This is not instinct in the way we usually use that word. This is knowledge. It is different. And the distinction matters because it means that the effectiveness of a wolf pack as a predator grows over time, accumulates with experience, and that the loss of experienced individuals from the pack is a genuine strategic loss, not just an emotional one. Let us talk about how a pack actually approaches a bison herd. Not abstractly but specifically the way it actually happens in the field, the kind of thing that observers at Yellowstone have documented enough times to describe the patterns with some confidence. The first phase is what researchers sometimes call the approach assessment. The pack moves toward the herd not in a direct charge, but in a measured progression that serves partly as movement toward the prey and partly as an information-gathering exercise. The wolves are watching the herd, all of them. Each animal in the pack is processing visual information about the herd's composition, its spacing, the behavior of individual animals within it. They are looking for the departure from the norm, the animal that is not quite matching the behavior of the animals around it, the subtle signal that indicates a weaker individual or one that is currently separated from the full protection of the group. The herd, meanwhile, is watching the wolves. This matters because the herd's response to the approach itself is information. A healthy, cohesive herd that bunches quickly and presents a unified front is a different situation from a herd that fragments slightly under the pressure of the approach, where individual animals make different decisions about direction or speed, where the defensive formation develops gaps or inconsistencies. The wolves are reading those responses as they produce them. There is a phase that field researchers have described, somewhat informally, as testing, during which the wolves may make short, limited runs toward individual animals or toward portions of the herd, not full committed attacks but probing efforts designed to see how specific animals respond. Does that particular bison hold its ground or does it run? How does it run, with the full explosive speed of a healthy animal or with something slightly off about its stride? Does it move back into the protection of the herd immediately, or does it take a slightly different path that takes it momentarily further from the group? A wolf gathering this information during a testing probe is not hunting yet. It is thinking. And then there are hunts that do not happen. This is one of the most counterintuitive and revealing findings from long-term observation of wolf-prey interactions. Wolves often approach prey, assess it, and walk away. They turn back from the challenge, they decline the encounter, and the rate at which they do this is much higher than most people realize. Studies of wolf-elk interactions in Yellowstone have shown that wolves fail to capture prey in the majority of their hunting attempts, and the failure rate is even higher against bison, where the risk of injury to the wolves themselves is substantially greater. But a significant number of those apparent failures are not exactly failures. They are decisions. The wolves looked at the prey and determined that the cost-benefit calculation did not favor an attempt, and they moved on. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it tells us something important about what kind of entity a wolf pack is. An entity that can look at a potential meal, assess the risk, and choose not to pursue it because the risk is not worth it, is demonstrating a form of strategic thinking that we usually reserve for human decision-making in our cultural narratives about intelligence. The wolf choosing not to hunt is, in a meaningful sense, planning. It is preserving its own capacity for future hunts by not sustaining an injury today. It is showing a time horizon in its decision-making that extends beyond the immediate moment of hunger. Now let us talk about what happens when they do commit. A committed attack by a wolf pack on a bison, particularly on a large, healthy bison, is one of the most physically demanding and dangerous things that occurs in terrestrial predation. It is not fast in the way that a cheetah taking a gazelle is fast. It is sustained. It can last for hours. It can cover kilometers. It can involve the pack cycling through different roles, some wolves pressing the chase while others rest briefly and then rejoin, creating a system of fatigue management that allows the pack collectively to outlast an animal that individually might be stronger than any single wolf. The wolves' strategy against a large bison almost never involves a direct frontal attack. Wolves do not have the mass or the weapons to take a large bison from the front. What they work toward is the rear, specifically the hindquarters, where the meat is deep and accessible, and where wounds are debilitating in ways that affect the bison's ability to continue fleeing and defending itself. Getting to that position requires the wolves to work around the animal's defenses, to absorb or avoid the kicks and the turns, to maintain contact with the animal while minimizing their own exposure to its weapons. In a pack attack on a bison, different wolves often take on functionally different roles. Some wolves are the chasers, the ones who maintain the pressure and keep the bison moving. Other wolves, often the larger and more experienced ones, are the grip wolves, the ones who look for the opportunity to seize hold of the prey and begin the process of bringing it down. There are wolves who seem to specialize in working the flanks, cutting off potential paths of escape or pushing the animal toward less favorable terrain. There are wolves who hang back and conserve energy, seemingly reading the hunt with a longer attention span than the wolves in immediate contact with the prey. The alphas of a pack, or more precisely the breeding pair, because recent research has moved away from the alpha terminology to something more nuanced but the basic concept holds, often take leading roles in the hunt, but this varies enormously by individual and by situation. What is consistent is that the hunt is coordinated. Not in the way that a military operation with explicit communication and assigned roles is coordinated, but in the way that a group of very experienced people who know each other intimately and share a common goal produce coordinated behavior without needing to talk it through in real time. They read each other. They respond to each other's movements. They fill gaps and adjust positions based on what the wolves around them are doing. This is where the pack's social structure becomes directly relevant to its predatory effectiveness. The relationships within a wolf pack, the dominance hierarchies and the affiliative bonds and the patterns of cooperation and competition that make up the social life of the group are not separate from the hunting behavior. They are continuous with it. A wolf that knows its place in the pack, that has clear relationships with every other individual in the group, that has hunted alongside these specific animals in enough situations to know how they behave, is a better hunter than a wolf in a disrupted or unfamiliar social context. Pack stability and predatory effectiveness are linked, and the disruption of pack structure through the death of key individuals or the introduction of conflict within the group has measurable effects on hunting success. Let us go to a specific scenario. Let us go to winter in Yellowstone's Lamar Valley, which is where some of the most detailed long-term observation of wolf-bison interactions has taken place, and let us walk through what a major predation event against a bison herd actually looks like. The Lamar Valley in January is a landscape stripped to its bones. The cottonwoods along the river are bare. The grasses under the snow are flattened and dead. The mountains that ring the valley are white above the tree line and dark with lodgepole pine below it. In the thermal areas, the hot springs steam against the cold air and the ground stays soft enough for small mammals to find food, and bison know this. The bison of Lamar Valley concentrate in winter in specific places, following patterns that have been reinforced over generations of animals learning where food is findable and where the snow is thin enough for digging down to the grasses beneath. The Wapiti Lake Pack, which in recent years has become one of the largest wolf packs in the greater Yellowstone area, has emerged as one of the most effective bison hunters in the region. At its height, this pack numbered more than 20 wolves, which is exceptional by any standard. And the pack's size gave it a capacity to pursue and bring down bison that smaller packs simply do not have. Large bison, mature bulls in particular, that would be effectively invulnerable to a pack of 5 or 6 wolves become genuinely vulnerable to a pack of 15 or 20, not because the mathematics of body weight change, but because the management of fatigue changes, and because the ability to maintain multiple contact points on a large, dangerous animal simultaneously changes the tactical calculus fundamentally. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. Size alone does not explain the pack's effectiveness. Many large aggregations of wolves fail to develop the coordinated hunting behavior that makes them genuinely dangerous to bison. The Wapiti pack's success has been attributed by observers to something more than numbers, to a specific competence that seems to reflect accumulated learning and effective transmission of that learning across generations of pack members. The older wolves in the pack know things. They have hunted bison enough times in this specific valley, in this specific climate, against the specific herd dynamics of the bison populations that winter in these areas, to have developed what we can only call expertise. The approach begins in the way it almost always begins, not with a sudden burst of speed but with a movement out of the tree line that is measured and deliberate. The wolves spread as they move across the valley floor. They are not a tight cluster. They are distributed in a loose formation that allows each animal to observe the herd from a slightly different angle and creates a wider sensory net across the target. The bison herd, which has been grazing in the shallow thermal area, detects the wolves before the wolves have closed to what most observers would call attack range. Bison have good senses, their hearing and smell particularly reliable, and they know what wolves are before they can see them clearly. The herd's response is the first piece of information the pack needs. The bulls on the perimeter of the herd raise their heads and orient toward the wolves. Some begin to move into position, placing themselves between the approaching predators and the body of the herd. The cows with calves move deeper into the group. This is the standard defensive posture, and it tells the wolves that the herd is alert and organized, which means that the easiest opportunity, a confused or fragmented herd with animals running in different directions, is not available today. The wolves continue the approach without acceleration. They are looking. And what they are looking for specifically is any deviation from the behavioral norm of a healthy, alert bison in a cohesive defensive group. They are looking at legs, specifically the gait of individual animals as the herd shifts and mills in response to the approaching threat. Bison that places a hind leg slightly differently from the others, that shows even a subtle weight shift or shortened stride, is putting information into the world that the wolves are evolved and trained to detect. They are looking at heads at the angle and movement of the head, because a bison that carries its head lower than its healthy companions may be indicating respiratory illness, which is debilitating, or fatigue or weakness from parasites. They are looking at coat condition, at the ribs showing or not showing through the winter coat. They are looking at the relative position of individual animals within the herd, because an animal that is consistently at the edge rather than the center, consistently a little separated, is either lower in the bison social hierarchy and therefore being pushed to the margin, or is an animal that is not fully able to hold its position in the group, and both of those things are relevant information. This assessment happens in seconds continuously as the pack closes the distance. And at some point through a process that observers describe as a behavioral cascade rather than a single identifiable signal, the pack's posture changes. The measured approach becomes a run, and the run is directed. Not at the herd, at a specific animal within or at the edge of the herd. The pack has made a selection. What follows is a chase that in bison encounters, unlike elk or deer encounters, often does not resolve quickly. Bison can run. A healthy adult bison can reach speeds of approximately 50 to 60 kilometers per hour over short distances, which is faster than most people realize and fast enough to outrun a wolf at full sprint over a short distance. The wolves are not faster than the bison on a flat sprint. Their advantage is in endurance and in the particular way that running through deep snow affects different body types differently. Bison are heavy, very heavy, and their mass works against them in deep snow in a way that it does not work against them on hard ground. Their legs go deep. Each stride costs more energy. Over a sustained chase in winter conditions, the gap between a wolf's endurance and a bison's endurance is larger than the gap between their top speeds, and the wolves understand this in the practical, operational sense of having experienced it repeatedly. The selected animal is running, the pack is running, and what happens next is where the coordination becomes most visible and most remarkable. Some wolves are maintaining the chase from behind, pressing the bison, keeping it running, preventing it from slowing or turning to face its pursuers. Other wolves are angling to the sides, trying to influence the direction of the chase, to push the bison toward terrain that is less favorable for a large heavy animal running at speed. A riverbank where the footing is uneven, a slope that forces the bison to slow, a section of deep snow that has drifted in the lee of a hill. The wolves are not just chasing. They are steering, they are trying to shape the geometry of the chase in ways that serve their eventual goal, which is to bring the animal down. The bison, for its part, is not passive in this process. It is making its own decisions. It is trying to turn back toward the herd, toward the protection of the group, and when the wolves cut that path off, it redirects. It is trying to find hard ground where its weight is an asset rather than a liability. It is looking for any terrain feature that lets it stop and turn, and present its horns rather than its haunches to the wolves behind it. And sometimes it does stop and turn. And when a large bison stops, turns, lowers its head and faces a wolf pack, something extraordinary happens in the pack's behavior. The pressure temporarily reduces. The wolves do not charge into the horns, they spread, they circle, they maintain distance from the bison's head while looking for angles. Some wolves may lie down in the snow. The chase has become, in these moments, something more like a siege. The bison cannot stay in this posture forever. It is breathing hard. Its energy reserves are being consumed by the run and by the sustained alertness of a prey animal under predator pressure. The wolves are also tired, but they are managing their fatigue better, having cycled through the chase in a way that prevented any individual animal from reaching exhaustion. The standoff lasts until the bison's assessment of the situation, whatever form that assessment takes in a bison's mind, shifts, and it runs again. It is in the second and third stages of this kind of extended chase that the outcome typically begins to resolve. The bison is slower now. The decision to run again when it comes produces a burst of speed that is visibly less than the first. The wolves press harder on the trailing animal. The grip wolves, the ones who have been hanging back and conserving, begin to close. And now comes the most dangerous moment in the entire encounter, for both the bison and the wolves. A wolf attacking a large bison from behind is trying to seize hold of the hindquarters, ideally the hamstring or the muscle mass of the rear leg, and to hold on while the bison continues to move. This is not clean or safe. A wolf in this position, hanging from the rear of a 900-kilogram running bison, is in a physically brutal situation. It can be dragged, it can be thrown, it can be struck by the bison's rear legs even while holding on. The risk of serious injury in this phase is higher than in any other phase of the hunt, and the wolves know it, in the sense that experienced wolves show a caution and a timing precision in this phase that younger wolves sometimes lack to their significant cost. But when it works, the grip on the hindquarters begins to slow the bison. The animal's stride is disrupted. Pain and the drag of the wolf's weight are taking something out of each step. Other wolves begin to close, not just following the chase now, but converging on the slowing animal. The distribution of the pack during the preceding chase, the wide spread that allowed some wolves to conserve energy, now pays off as wolves that are fresher than the wolves who ran the entire distance arrive to help anchor an animal that is beginning to fail. The bringing down of a large adult bison by a wolf pack is not instant. It takes time. The bison fights throughout, twisting, kicking, trying to use its horns in whatever direction presents an opportunity. Wolves are injured in this phase, sometimes severely, sometimes fatally. The history of individual wolves in Yellowstone's track packs includes animals that were killed during bison encounters, gored or kicked to death by prey that remained dangerous even as it was dying. Every experienced hunter in the pack carries the physical record of this in healed injuries, in changed gaits, in the particular wariness that comes from having been on the losing end of an encounter with an animal that did not choose to be prey. When the bison finally goes down, it is not immediately quiet. There is still fight in the animal. Wolves that move in too quickly to begin feeding can still be injured, and again, the experienced wolves show a patience here that younger animals sometimes do not. They wait for the specific moment when the bison's strength is genuinely exhausted, and then they feed. What happens at a bison kill within a wolf pack is another window into the social complexity of these animals. The order of feeding reflects the pack's social structure, but not in the simple, linear way that older descriptions of wolf behavior suggested. It is not just alpha feeds first, then everyone else in descending rank. It is a dynamic negotiation, shaped by the specific relationships within the pack, by who did the most work in the hunt, by the presence or absence of pups who get preferential access to high-quality meat, by individual personality and individual assertiveness. Large kills like bison provide enough food that multiple wolves can feed simultaneously, which reduces the intensity of the competitive dynamic compared to smaller prey. There is enough for most of the pack to eat well, and the relative abundance changes the social atmosphere at the kill in ways that observers consistently note. Ravens appear almost immediately, and ravens in Yellowstone are not casual scavengers. They are what researchers have called ecological partners in the predation system. Ravens have learned to follow wolves. They have learned that wolves produce kills. Individual ravens in Yellowstone have been observed following specific wolf packs, recognizing them as individuals, tracking their movements across the valley. The relationship between ravens and wolves is one of the genuinely remarkable ecological associations in the northern Rockies, a cross-species partnership that has evolved over thousands of years and that benefits both parties, the wolves getting early warning of prey from ravens' aerial perspective, the ravens getting access to carcasses that they could not open on their own. Some researchers have gone further, suggesting that the playful interactions frequently observed between wolves and ravens, the ravens landing near wolves and hopping toward them until the wolves give chase, the wolves tolerating and apparently enjoying the ravens' presence, represent a relationship that has moved beyond mere utility into something that looks, from a behavioral standpoint, like genuine positive association. Coyotes follow, eagles arrive. Foxes hover at the edges waiting for a moment of inattention. The bison carcass becomes, within hours of the kill, a feeding station for dozens of species and individuals, a concentrated pulse of energy that ripples outward through the ecosystem. This is the mechanism behind what Yellowstone researchers have called the trophic cascade, the series of effects that radiate outward from the predator-prey relationship and reshape the ecosystem in ways that were not predicted before the reintroduction and are still being fully mapped. The bison herd itself changes as a result of predation pressure from wolves, not just in numbers, though numbers matter. The behavior of the herd changes, the distribution of the herd across the landscape changes. Where the herd grazes, when it moves, how long it stays in any one place, all of these things are influenced by the knowledge carried within the herd's social structure in a way that mirrors the knowledge carried within the wolf pack's social structure, that wolves are present and that certain places and behaviors are more dangerous than others. Bison have been shaped by wolf predation for millions of years, and the behavioral strategies that have made them the formidable, cohesive, defense-oriented animals they are today were forged in the crucible of exactly this kind of predation pressure. The wolves made the bison what the bison are, and the bison made the wolves what the wolves are, and that coevolutionary relationship is still running, still active, still producing new adaptations and new strategies in both populations. But let us go deeper into the pack's internal dynamics, because the social story of how a pack develops and maintains its bison hunting competence is as remarkable as the hunting itself, and in some ways more difficult to fully appreciate without knowing the backstory. The knowledge that makes a wolf pack effective against bison is not automatic. It has to be developed and transmitted. Young wolves in packs that regularly hunt bison go through a period of what we can only call apprenticeship, during which they participate in hunts led by more experienced animals and gradually develop the skills and the knowledge that effective bison predation requires. This is not instantaneous. Researchers tracking individual wolves in Yellowstone have noted that wolves in their first and second years are frequently a liability rather than an asset in bison encounters. Too aggressive in situations where patience is required, too hesitant in situations where commitment is necessary, making errors of timing and positioning that experienced animals have long since learned to avoid. The transmission of this knowledge from older to younger wolves within the pack is one of the most striking examples of animal culture in the natural world. Culture, in the technical sense that animal behaviorists use the term, refers to information that is socially transmitted rather than genetically encoded, information that is learned from others rather than simply developed through individual trial and error. Wolf packs hunting bison exhibit cultural transmission in this technical sense. The specific strategies, the particular knowledge of local terrain, the reading of bison behavioral signals, these are things that travel from experienced wolves to young wolves through the medium of shared experience, of hunting together, watching and learning from more skilled individuals in real situations with real stakes. And this means that the loss of experienced wolves is not just a demographic event, it is a knowledge loss. When the Druid Peak Pack, once the most famous wolf pack in Yellowstone's northern range, declined in the 2000s due to a combination of disease and conflict with other packs, researchers noted not just a reduction in numbers but a change in the pack's behavioral repertoire. a loss of specific tactical sophistication that had taken years to develop, and which did not immediately reconstitute in the surviving and dispersing animals. The pack's institutional memory was partially destroyed with the destruction of the individuals who carried it. This has implications for conservation that go beyond simple population mathematics. Protecting a wolf population is not just about maintaining a minimum viable population count. It is about protecting the social structures and the experienced individuals through which behavioral knowledge is transmitted. A population of wolves reduced to a minimum viable number by habitat destruction or hunting pressure is not a population that is simply smaller. It may be a population that has lost critical accumulated knowledge, and that will require multiple generations to rebuild the hunting competence that the larger, socially intact population had developed. The Wapiti Lake pack that we discussed earlier provides a contrasting example of what intact social structure and accumulated knowledge look like in practice. This pack, which has been tracked since it formed from dispersing animals in the southern Yellowstone area, developed its bison hunting specialization over a period of years, and researchers watching the pack during this developmental period were able to observe the process in real time. The pack's first attempts at bison were largely unsuccessful, marked by the kind of errors that inexperienced wolves make: commitment when assessment should have recommended retreat, poor terrain selection for pursuits, insufficient coordination during the critical grip phase. The pack went through a period during which bison predation cost it real injury and returned limited reward. But the pack kept trying. It kept encountering bison. The individual animals within it kept accumulating experience. And the experiences, including the injuries, including the retreats, including the hunts that cost real effort and produced nothing, became the substrate from which expertise grew. Researchers documenting the pack's bison encounters over a 5-year period saw a measurable improvement in success rate that corresponded to, and seemed caused by, the development of specific behavioral adaptations in the pack's approach and hunting strategy. The pack did not just get better at hunting, it got better at hunting bison. It developed bison-specific knowledge that transferred across generations as the original experienced animals began to be supplemented and eventually replaced by animals that had learned from them. Now let us talk about something that gets less attention than it deserves, which is the wolves themselves as individuals. Because the narrative of pack hunting, of collective behavior and coordinated strategy, can accidentally erase the individuals who make up the pack, and the individuals matter enormously. The history of named and numbered wolves in Yellowstone is one of the most remarkable longitudinal records of individual animal lives that exists anywhere in the study of wild animals. Researchers have documented the stories of individual wolves with enough detail to trace the arcs of their lives from birth to death, their relationships, their achievements, their failures, their influence on the packs they were part of, and the landscape they moved through. And within this record, there are stories of individual wolves whose influence on the bison hunting behavior of their packs was so significant that the researchers tracking them have been willing to use language that normally gets scientists into trouble, language that acknowledges individual personality and individual leadership and individual innovation in ways that strict behavioral science usually resists. Wolf 21, the dominant male of the Druid Peak pack for years, was one of the most closely studied wolves in Yellowstone's history and one of the largest males ever measured in the reintroduced population. But his most noted characteristic was not his size, it was his behavior during hunts. Observers repeatedly noted that Wolf 21 showed an unusual degree of restraint during the approach and assessment phase of hunts, an unusual patience in testing situations, and an unusual willingness to abort hunts that other wolves in the pack seemed ready to commit to. Whether this represented a genuine strategic intelligence or a more complex interaction of individual temperament with situational factors, the effect was measurable. Under his presence and influence, the pack's hunt success rate was high, and the pack's injury rate during bison encounters was lower than might have been expected for a pack that regularly took on large bulls. Wolf 754 was noted for an almost opposite behavioral profile: highly aggressive in the press, extremely committed during the grip phase, the wolf who would hold on when other wolves let go, and correspondingly, the wolf who sustained the most injuries in the pack over the course of his tracked life. His aggression sometimes accelerated hunts past the point of optimal timing and produced opportunities that a more cautious pack might have taken more slowly. His presence in the pack's bison hunting efforts was net positive in terms of kills, but also net positive in terms of wolf injuries, and the balance between those two outcomes is not straightforward to evaluate. These individual stories matter not as anecdotes, but as evidence that within the collective behavioral phenomenon of pack hunting, individual variation is real and significant and consequential. The pack is not a uniform entity. It is a collection of specific individuals with specific skills and specific tendencies and specific histories, and the emergent behavior of the pack is the product of those specificities in interaction with each other and with the prey they pursue. Which brings us to something that the most recent research on wolf behavior in Yellowstone and elsewhere is beginning to grapple with more seriously, which is the question of what we mean when we talk about wolf decision-making, and what the implications of that decision-making are for our understanding of animal cognition more broadly. The evidence for flexible, contextual, experience-based decision-making in wolves is now extensive. Wolves adjust their hunting strategies based on prey type, prey condition, pack composition, terrain, season, weather conditions, and competitive pressure from other predators. They remember specific places where successful hunts have occurred. They recognize and respond differently to individual prey animals, showing what looks like a recall of the specific animal's defensive capabilities from previous encounters. They make what appear to be probabilistic assessments of hunt success, backing away from encounters that, based on accumulated experience, have a low likelihood of success, even when hunger is high. They teach in the practical sense of facilitating the learning of younger animals through the mechanism of shared experience in real situations. None of this requires us to claim that wolves are conscious in the way humans are conscious, or that they deliberate in the way humans deliberate. The mechanisms underlying this behavior are almost certainly not identical to human cognition. But the functional outcomes of these behaviors, the flexibility, the context sensitivity, the experience integration, the social transmission of information, are sufficiently similar to what we call intelligence in other contexts that the language we use to describe them needs to be richer than the language we have traditionally used for predator behavior. A wolf pack that has learned to take down bison is not just an efficient predator. It is a learning community. It is an organization with a memory that exceeds individual lifespans. It is a system for converting experience into knowledge and knowledge into action across generations. The wolves that kill a large bull bison in the deep snow of a January morning in Yellowstone are drawing on information gathered by animals that died before they were born, transmitted through the mechanism of social learning in the specific context of living and hunting together.